You know what? This next guest, I've tried just about everything about personal branding. I have worked really hard my whole life. I'm always willing to try something once. But you know what? My next guest right now actually inspired me to look at personal branding in a whole different way. Now, this person is outstanding in every way. Marina B, because you know what? I have a hard time spelling the last name and do it. She's outstanding. She actually started me in personal branding. Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. Da, da, da. Welcome to Shed Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. I like the Marina B angle. I might adopt it moving forward. I'm going to be the female version of Gary V.
And you know what? It should be, because I started looking at and I was pronouncing your name, Byezhanova, and you're going, no, it's close. And I'm going, you know what? I can't seem to get the names right. And it's like, you know what? Why fight it? Admit it. Be who you are and say, you know what? I can't say it and get pronunciation right. And why not be honest and say, help me out with your last name?
And
Now, how
instead
often
we
do you get
hacked
that
it.
happening? Yeah,
Huh?
we hacked it. How often does that happen?
Oh, all the time. And it's really funny when I first came to Canada, because when I was born, it was still the Soviet Union. I was born in Ukraine, but at the time it was occupied. It was the Soviet Union. And when I came to Canada, well, first of all, it took me forever to learn how to spell my own last name, because the alphabet is completely different, right? And in my native language, it's Cyrillic, it's completely different. And somehow, when I was getting my Canadian passport, like a whole lot of extra letters got added to my last name. So it took me a moment to learn how to spell it. And then, of course, nobody could ever pronounce it. And I used to be just so ashamed of that and uncomfortable and embarrassed. And then years passed. And, I even at one point, I thought of changing my last name when I went on the job market, and I wanted to change it to my dad's last name, which is a Jewish last name, and it's easy to spell and pronounce. And then I didn't do that. I started going through the process. It was too complicated and I dropped it. So happy I didn't change my name, because first of all, I'm the only Marina Byezhanova you can find online or on LinkedIn. So I do not get confused. And I also made it part of my story. You might remember when we met, I was giving a talk for your entrepreneurs organization chapter. And so I just made it part of my story. My name gets confused all the time.
And it's interesting when you look at it and you take your brand, and a lot of people, when we talk about branding, because that's exactly what you're all about, brand of a leader. And obviously you have to become a leader to actually brand leaders. And here you are. And what's interesting, if you were to Google you and just on there, and put it all in there, there'll be pages of you. You're right there. You're at the top of the food chain. You're there. You're branded. You are what we call is actually practice exactly who you're supposed to be. And how did you actually get started to be that person of who you are today? And I want to actually dive a little bit about EO, because how did EO affect you as well?
Oh my God, hugely. First of all, on the topic of Googling myself, my biggest is so funny. Over the years, I've become a public speaker globally. And so, when I get Googled, there's some accolades, that's good stuff. But the biggest credit I get is when my teenage daughter Googles me. And she said, I Googled you with my friends, and it said you're an author, and it said you're a speaker. And my friends thought it was so cool. So it's so funny. We think about building our thought leadership. It will serve our businesses. We all want to grow and scale our businesses, and then we get our biggest reward when our kid Googles us. How Entrepreneurs Organization impacted me was in a huge way. I always felt, Kevin, like I didn't belong anywhere, and I always felt kind of, I don't know, maybe weird or maybe just different and not in a good way. Like I always found it difficult to fit into groups. And I remember so vividly going to my first EO event. It was a test drive here in Montreal. Test drive, for people who don't know, is when it's like a recruitment event, right? And I remember leaving and sitting in a taxi, going back home, and just so cliche, but so true, so vividly thinking, I found my people. I found people who will, instead of trying to make comments that make me think that I should change myself, make comments that make me feel that I should embrace myself and be even more myself and even bolder. So EO it's been almost 11 years now that I'm in EO. So it's been quite transformational.
And it's interesting because, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that part of it, because I've been in EO for 25 years,
No
and I
way.
can look, yeah, like I'm one of the not founding members, but I've been in
Oh,
EO
geez.
forever, and YPO. But but what's really interesting, and there's turning points in people's lives, that fork in the road, that one talk that actually made you go over here, that one talk or that one moment in time that actually changed your life. And we laughed just before we went on air here, and to talk about, well, tell the story about you. But it was interesting. You came to the EO event, and you were doing your talk on a brand of a leader, and what does it take, and then how do you do your personal brand? What does it take? And it became to me, and it was one of those an eye opener for me, that all of a sudden it opened up a whole new avenue and a whole new door. Yes, I wanted to be that guy, the things you know that you didn't know, and I own a bunch of businesses. I had this, but to be out there, and you had that conversation we had, and my son was there as well that day as well, and it was an impact. And you talk about your daughter when he Googled you, or she Googled you, and she saw you there. When you were there, and my son there, and that goes, Dad, that's you. That There's that branding, there's the YouTube
Mhm.
channel, there's the podcasting. Like, you had that whole laid out right there, and it was one of those inspiring moments that actually changed my life. And that's why I wanted to really bring you in here to talk about that. As entrepreneurs and business owners like myself, we soon forget or don't have the ideas to be and work on personal brand. And I believe it needs to be talked about by a professional, and how to do that. So please, explain more, especially for entrepreneurs that want to be great brand leaders, personal brand,
Mhm.
and what that looks
Well,
like.
first of all, that share just gave me goosebumps, and thank you for saying that. What can be more meaningful to me than being a catalyst for change, and especially a catalyst for change for an OG EO member? This is something
Yeah.
that I will cut out the snippet of when you spoke about it, and I will re-listen to it when I need, fuel and motivation. Personal branding is fascinating because most entrepreneurs, most successful founders cringe at the idea of building a personal brand because we want to focus on building our businesses and scaling our businesses, and we don't want to appear like an attention seeking narcissist. A, and then also B, a lot of business owners say, well, for what? What do I have to say that's so valuable? Like, I know how to build business, but I don't know how to be like a persona. Like, why do I need to be a persona? And so this becomes a fascinating topic because leadership is changing, marketing is changing. And so it's becoming part of being a modern day leader to be a thought leader, to be an inspirational figure, and to support the marketing function of the organization, not to become the marketing function of the organization. Of course not. We're not becoming spokespeople for our companies. We have marketing departments. But with our thought leadership and expertise, we fuel the marketing, the marketing arm of the organization. We're now finding that, well, more and more people, instead of using Google search to find experts, to find businesses, to use, they're searching in GPT, right? And I'm sure you are too. I'm sure you're starting to look things up in GPT instead of Google search. GPT is interesting. It doesn't search through the rankings of a business. It searches through thought leadership and expertise. And so, as we, and especially in service businesses, when we as CEOs and founders develop thought leadership and expertise, we become market leaders as a result. And now, because search is changing, instead of SEO, we're looking at AIO, our organizations have a higher chance of being found as well. So it's just becoming an integral part of a modern leader's toolkit, as much as many leaders are still trying to just postpone it or stall it and don't want to embrace it.
So I want to dive a little bit more into that, because I'm looking at the AI side of that, for yourself. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the AI? Like, so we have the Google search that for a company versus the AI, the Chat GPT. So, and you said, I assume that and it's the things you know that you don't. And I actually don't know about that part of it. Can you explain a little bit more about that, and how that aspect works, versus Googling the brand versus the thought leader?
So we've had multiple prospects come to us. And so whenever somebody books a discovery call, we always ask, how did you find brand of a leader, right? And for the longest time, we would hear, oh, I Googled you and I found you guys. And now more and more, we're having people say, I asked ChatGPT and it recommended Marina as a thought leader in the field, and then said, and Marina owns an agency that's called Brand of a Leader, versus just, searching in Google search that, through the algorithm of SEO and everything will rank companies accordingly. AI search, from what it seems, optimizes based on the body of thought leadership and credibility that comes through thought leadership, which is really a fascinating shift. Again, more so, I would say, for services business, which is a vast majority of businesses that dominate our economy. That is a huge shift. Among many other benefits of founders building brands, this is a really interesting shift to observe.
So as you're observing that shift, what would somebody actually do to actually start that foundation being built so that they're recognized in that shift? Because a lot of people say, well, great, you have 15 years of experience. You had the Google. Yeah, it shifted over. You've got the name. Then all of a sudden it followed you because AI. Is there, and I don't call it a hack because there's no such thing as a hack. People think that of hacks as, oh, it's a quick fix. No, there is process to everything that you do in life, and you have to stick to the process of doing it in business and in health and in wealth and everything. But on that aspect of it, how do the people, okay, have a starting point to say, how do I start that as a personal brand?
So, the ultimate starting point, which is the most overlooked one, is before taking action on marketing the brand. So, before saying, I'm going to go on LinkedIn, or I'm going to launch a podcast, or I'm going to guest on podcasts, or I'm going to become a public speaker, the number one step is to figure out, well, what is your brand going to be all about? A lot of people come to us and say, I want to be recognized as a thought leader. How can you help me? And then the immediate question is, thought leader in what? And then there's a pause. Well, entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship what? You can't be a thought leader in entrepreneurship. That's very wide. Entrepreneurship in what? And so the number one step is first to figure out, well, what is it that you're bringing to conversation? What is it that you're bringing to the market? It's noisy out there. A lot of people self-promoting that's going to be interesting or unique. What's your point of view? What's your angle? What is the message that you want to bring? Messaging, your core speaking points, all of those different things that are foundational, that are strategy. That's number one. That's really important. I can tell you, Kevin, most people overlook it. They start putting themselves out there and then they say, it's not working. Why is it not working? I'm doing all of this. It's not working because there's nothing cohesive or unique. So you have to first create strategy, plan. We know that in our businesses, we don't know it when we start building our founder brand. So that's really important. After that, what becomes important as the second step is to choose your first platform. It starts with the first platform. There are a lot of people who say, what, I figured out my brand, my position, and my angle and everything from my personal brand. Now I'm just going to go everywhere and go on all the platforms. Yes, ideally, you're going to be everywhere, but is it feasible? You have to have the resources. You have to yourself have the bandwidth to be able to dedicate to it. You have to have the stamina to continue, because if that's not inherently your comfort zone to be putting yourself out there, then after a good 6 months, you start burning out and you don't want to do it anymore. So the first step in marketing ourselves is choosing one platform, the one that feels most comfortable. For a lot of people, it's LinkedIn because we're in business, right? So that's a natural. For a lot of people, it's being a guest on podcasts. It's the easier, quicker return on investment of our time. So you choose your platform. Just focus on that platform, at least for 6 months, ideally a year. Just do one, dominate one, get used to it, make it that it's a habit, your routine. If you're working with someone, they're helping you and it's structured, and then you add the next platform. Of course, because you were asking me in AI search, what it picks up is on the overall body of thought leadership that it's finding. Oh, I'm searching for personal branding expertise, and I'm finding that Marina has a lot of YouTube videos and podcast interviews and a lot of LinkedIn content, all these magazines. This sounds credible, and then that appears in search. But it takes time. Of course, as you said, I've been doing this for many, many years. For someone starting out, it's a process. It's not an event, so it takes time. But we just start with one. We do it well. We'll start seeing results, and then we'll add to that.
So what is the one question that when somebody comes to you and they ask you, say, okay, I've got $100 million. I've got all this. Let's just do whatever it's going to do. And what's that one question? And like you just mentioned, you said, okay, fine tune that one. No, 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 no. You need to fine tune that one for me. Do you ever
Mhm.
get it where you tell me what I should be?
Mhm.
Does that happen? And what do you tell them when that happens?
It's the best thing when that happens, because then it makes our job much
Yeah.
easier because we know what we're doing, so we can guide the person. The worst thing that
Yeah.
happens, Kevin, is when somebody comes and they tell us that they know, and what they share with us is just not a winning strategy. I already know what my brand is, and it's ABC, and it just sounds boring, not unique, or just not inspiring. That's a hard conversation to have. When someone comes and says, listen, I'm looking for experts, looks like you're experts, you tell me, you let me know, then that's when we start the process. We first get to know our clients on a deep level. That's very important in this line of work because it is personal brand. So the first step is we take you through the process of 3 deep dives, 3 75-minute conversations, where, as I said, we really get to know you. And time again, clients say, I thought this was going to be a marketing meeting. And instead, it feels like a meeting with my shrink who was asking me about my childhood and how it impacted my entrepreneurial journey. Now, that's really important to us because we're branding the human being. So we need to get to the bottom of that. And in that process, we also identify, okay, well, what is going to be the platform that's going to deliver on our goals, that's going to have the audience that this person is looking for, and that, again, is going to give all of our clients a time poor. They're not financially poor, but they're time poor. And so they're always looking at, what's going to give me the biggest return on the investment, which is my time. And then that depends on the client. Some clients are writers, so that is the best direction. Some are talkers, so then podcasting is the best direction. So I recommend, based on the person, there's no one answer across the board of everybody should be doing ABC. There is some, depends on the person and the goals.
So when all of a sudden they're putting together as an entrepreneur coming in, their EO, YPO, they're whatever, all entrepreneurs coming to you. Now they're having that conversation with you and they say, okay, how many hours should I actually budget for to make this successful a week? Is there an actual be prepared? It's 20 minutes a day, or it's a day. It's what, 20 minutes a week. Is there a kind of a formula on that state? Say, be prepared that it's going to be an X amount of time. Is there something like that?
There is, absolutely. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of with the work that I've done with my co-founder, building brandable leaders, we're very process oriented and very structured, which for our type of a field is not common. Most of our clients are EO members and YPO members, and that they really appreciate that about us, that it's not kind of convoluted and creative chaos. Everything is very processed out. So most of our clients, when we figure out their brand identity, what their brand's going to be all about, and we start executing, most hire us to help them create LinkedIn content and to book them on podcast as guests. Vast majority of clients, that's what they focus on as platform, is guesting on podcasts and LinkedIn. We work on a monthly cycle. So what we do is we interview you for an hour once a month, and then we deliver you all of your content for the entire month. And we book you on 1 to 2 podcasts on a monthly basis. So what that means is you invest 1 hour a month for that interview. You should not be investing more than 2 hours a month in editing the content that we send to you. And as we continue working together, it becomes less and less. And then you have, let's say, up to 2 hours where you are interviewing on podcasts. So that means that you have 5 hours a month that you're dedicating to this work. It's not a lot, but it's still an investment. It can go back to zero because you can't outsource this. The brand is you. You need to be a part of it, right?
Okay.
So 5 hours a month is the baseline. Then, of course, some clients, there's additional work that we're doing. We're building personal websites. We're coordinating their photo shoots. Maybe we're writing thought leadership articles. That will add. But the baseline is if you're able to dedicate 5 hours a month, you're going to be in really good shape and you're going to see a lot of results.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode. Amazing. Now, another quick question. Everything's always a quick question when we're asking, but what's really interesting, when you first started this, and then what happened when you first started, what you thought the industry was, what you thought brand of a leader was, to where it is today. What happens like right now with, you've got the tariffs, the Trumps, you've got AI, you've got all that. Looking at the difference between then and now, what's the difference?
Huge difference. So started Brand of a Leader just under 4 years ago. We're about to complete our 4th year since we incorporated. There wasn't as much competition on the market. So first of all, we're seeing a lot more competition, but not competition from agencies. Agencies that are structured like us, that only do CEO branding, that are focused like this. There are very, very few. However, there are a lot of people that all of a sudden became personal branding experts. They used to do something completely different. I mean, we're seeing that a lot with AI experts too, right? Like we know those people also in EO and YPO. how are you an AI guru? You were doing something very different last year, right? But when something becomes trendy, a lot of people will jump on the train. So we're seeing a lot of increased competition. So as I said, not necessarily quality competition yet, but I'm sure that's coming because the field is becoming more popular. So number one. Number two, we got very disrupted with AI about 6 to 9 months ago because we create content. And all of a sudden, everyone became a writer, right? GPT came out, everyone is a writer. Of course, now this dying down because all of the fellow CEOs who felt it was so fun and trendy got bored of editing GPT content, and that became a thing. But we had to change quite a bit, and we had a decision to make. Do we become the anti AI voice and keep telling everyone how AI is so terrible, or do we realize that we're young, modern, and hip, and we're going to incorporate AI and become, AI fueled but human powered, which is what we ended up doing. But that was a monumental shift to us. And of course, because vast majority of our clients is in the US, we've worked with clients in 12 countries, which is something I'm very proud of. Vast majority of our clients are in the US. So of course, we're very dependent on the US economy being good. And, starting the business, at, kind of more or less end of COVID. One thing that I always joke about, Kevin, and there's not really a joke, is are we going to get at least a couple of years of brandable leader life of a great economy? I just want, like an up because it was COVID and then technical recession and now the US with everything going on. It's been an interesting journey.
Now, would you ever open up in the United States, like move from Canada to the United States? Is there any tax benefits to doing that, or does it really make a difference?
No, we've
Because do
considered
you bill
opening
through Canadian?
somewhere. No, we've thought about opening somewhere where there's a tax haven, rather
Here.
than anywhere in North America, as you know, right? It's a tax upon a tax. We've considered, Ireland or islands. We've talked more about that. But what's interesting? I think there's a high chance that we might end up opening office, or at least, registering an entity in my home country of Ukraine, because we are starting to interview more and more people there. We hired our first hire in Ukraine, who's in Kiev. We're in the process of filling two more positions in Ukraine, and so it might be a really interesting turn of events. But we might open an actual presence there.
So if you're going to open up a presence in the Ukraine, and then let's dive into that because I only see it. I was on the podcast the other day, a LinkedIn podcast, and I was talking to this lady, and then we were talking about what is your actually perception of Canada? Like, what do you think of what Canada's like, and in her eyes, and vice versa? Why? What do I think of what the United States is like? And we both came from two different ships, two different ideas, and we're seeing it different. Now, you being in Canada, you being Ukrainian and seeing Ukraine, is the storytelling in Ukraine the same storytelling that we're saying here in Canada? So Ukraine, things are bad, things are going. Then all of a sudden, you're going to open up a business there. What is the actual story to that?
Ukraine's fascinating. I've always been a big patriot of my home country, always. But of course, since the war started, it's peaked for me quite a bit. To me, it's a country of heroes, and there's no other way of saying that. I don't know if you know, but we're in the process of building a chapter, an EO chapter in Ukraine, and I'm actually member of the first ever EO Ukraine forum. And I can tell you, Kevin, that I'm constantly inspired in EO. I mean, it's just a community of incredibly inspiring people. But I'm never as inspired as when I'm on those 4-hour forum meetings, virtual. Time flies, by the way. You would think sitting 4 hours virtual meeting, you start getting a little bit tired. You don't, because you're just sitting there. I don't. I just sit there being massively inspired because the country is at war. It's brutal war. I think the story you said, do the stories match? The story is undertold in Canada. We don't talk about it as much anymore. It's brutal. There's constant bombing, there's constant shelling, there's constant people dying. And in the middle of that, people are building, scaling, thriving, persevering. The guys that are in Ukraine, they have money. They could have left. They can leave. And they chose to stay, keep families, have new babies since the war started, and building businesses in the middle of all of that. So it's an incredible thing to see. They buildings get destroyed, they rebuild them, they are trying to do what they can with the economy, and incredible talent there. And so we started hiring in Ukraine. I want to inspire more business owners to hire in Ukraine because it's as cost effective as hiring in, the Philippines, or you mentioned, I think Iraq. You said you hired from. It's as cost effective, but you get incredible talent and also incredible resilience. I remember one morning. Um, Messaging with my team member in Ukraine after they had big, horrible bombing of a children's hospital in Kiev, where he lives. And so he said that he was in shelter and now he's out of shelter. And I said, my goodness, like I can't even imagine. Do you want to take a day off? Do you want to take a mental health day, which in North America very prevalent, right? Lots of mental health days. And he says, no, Marina, why? It's the shelling's finished. I'm good. It didn't even occur to him that he needed, time to reset or step away. So the resilience of the people is incredible and inspiring. And so business goes on, but in the most horrific of circumstances.
Well, that's an amazing story because you think about it and how EO is actually touching that, and you're being a part of it. Now, is that like a bridge forum, or you're actually getting everybody to Zoom in? And how many people are in your forum?
We're 7 people right now. 4 are spread out, and then 3 are in Kiev, and so they meet together. So they're together in, they rotate where they meet, but each one is on a computer, so that it's clear. And yes, 7 of us in Zoom. So it's not bridge. It is an EO Ukraine chapter being formed, and so it's an EO Ukraine forum. So I'm very fortunate that because the chapter is not big yet, I was able to be a part of it.
Oh man, you know what? And if you need a EO mentorship, because I'm qualified for the mentorship now to help out as 25 years, and I had to take EO all over again. I had to take forum training, forum mentorship, forum. I did everything just from 25 years ago, and how much it's changed 25 years ago to now, and on my forum as well. So it's been an absolutely amazing for me in EO and growing and expanding in everything that I'm doing now. The next 5 years. So where you are today, I want to ask you this question. So where you are today, what is the one thing that you did 5 years ago, that one little thing that changed your outlook today, that one small thing that you say, thank God I did that? And what's that one thing today that you're going to do or did do that you know that you're going to do in the future that will change your outlook
Oh, that's
or
really cool. That's a really
perspective?
deep question. I have perfect clarity on the first part of the question, and then I might
Yeah.
need some coaching on the second. The first one is super clear. 5 years ago, I was in Turks and Caicos. It was a forum retreat for me. And at the end of the retreat, we were just chilling with a fellow member. The guys had left, me and the other woman, we stayed. And we were talking about how we were not happy in our businesses. And, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do? And I started talking to her about how I wanted to launch a branding agency for CEOs, and we're having wine and just like chilling by the pool. It did not feel like a serious conversation that we were having, Kevin. And then she goes, Marina, like this is your thing. This is what you need to start this business. You need to do it. Promise me you're going to do it. She goes, come on, what are you going to call it? When you start this business, what are you going to call it? And I take another sip of wine and I go, I don't know. It's going to be a branding agency for CEOs, brand of a leader. She goes, oh my God, I love that name. That's the most amazing name. The domain's not going to be available. That's real words. GoDaddy.com. The domain is available. I purchased the domain just in case. 5 years later, here we are, clients in 12 countries, and we're growing and doing amazing. So that's 5 years ago. What am I going to do today? What can I do now? Well,
Now it
today
has to
I
be
started.
one small thing. It
Yeah,
has to be a small thing. It can't be big. Okay.
yeah,
One small thing. That sip of water, okay, sorry, that sip of wine
yeah,
gave you the name.
yeah.
That transitioned to everything and you bought the domain. Now, today, that one little thing that in 5 years will be little. Can't be big because that's just, I want it really small that it changes over time because of you doing the brand of a leader at the beginning. See how it grew? Now it's
Mm.
that little thing. You're planting it today.
Hmm. That's a really difficult question. I think the first step I would take, and then the story that I will tell in 5 years, is I was having a conversation with Kevin on Shut Talk, and he asked me a question that was so thought provoking that I went home and I journaled on the question, with the prompt being, what is the one step you can take for something monumental to happen 5 years from now?
And and the thing about it, it's not even the step, it's the seed that we planted because what we do today affects us 30, 60, 90 days from now. And it's like that one thought way back in the day is that, I'm glad I turned left that day because it
Mm,
changed my life. Me not going, example, that one little thing, me not going to that event that you had done,
mhm,
me looking in a different direction would never ever had a conversation with you today
mm.
that changed my life then to open up, to ask better questions, to be curious, to grow who I am. That was a fork in the road as that one question when we're talking about, because we all seem to know, it's one of the things is we know the past, we know the present, and we can tell our future because our history dictates it to us. So
Mm.
why don't I write the narrative that's going to show me what greatness and being a brand of a leader, being brand of greatness looks like in the future.
But how do you do that? How do you do it when it's not in retrospect? And as you said, not looking at history, but being intentional and knowing what that step should be?
So to ask that question backwards for myself is I do a podcast. The podcast, I've never listened to a podcast ever before in my life. Okay. Now I've done podcasts, but I've never listened to a podcast. I wrote a book without ever reading a book. Now the purpose of this is that I don't know where it's going, but I know one thing's for sure. I'm building a foundation of something that will be greater in the future, that will be greater and better than who I am. And as long as I'm moving forward into a direction of positive as humanity, I can't fail. And that seed of planting the podcast, like my personal branding, and I really focus on the personal branding side of it due to the fact is I don't know. But as long as I'm moving that one step further and moving the needle, is it right, wrong, or indifferent? There's no such thing as right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just doing it. And then having a conversation with you, having a conversation with that, we don't know our outcomes until 5 years from now and going, what changed your life back then? Because we don't recognize it until we dwell on our past and go, oh, wonder why that did that versus this. Because we always look at movies, how we looked at them before versus what does the future look like?
I like that a lot. You
So
know, where that really resonates with me is I find that a lot of people only want to take steps when they know what the outcomes are going to be. And you can't always, as you said, predict every single thing. You can connect it. I've always been a big believer in taking massive amounts of action and also just saying yes to things. Like a lot of people say, learn how to say no. And my biggest, life motto is learn how to say yes. Because when you say yes to a million things, and a lot of people in EO say, oh, how did you get that amazing role? Or how did you get invited to that amazing opportunity was because I said yes to like 15,000 other things because I participated in those things. And then, in combination, they led to something. So your philosophy resonates quite a bit. I like it a lot.
thank you very much. And it's interesting because when you look at yourself, and it's always been the yes, because I remember when we had the dinner that night, and then all of a sudden you were doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. And it was always about doing. And you had mentioned during the podcast here, what was really interesting is that people have a tendency, and all of a sudden, those who can't do teach, right? You've ever heard that saying? And then all of a sudden, we get people that failed out of EO or failed out of what, and it's not a fail. There's no such thing as failure that they do, then they think, you know what, I'm going to teach it versus grow it. And it's interesting. And do you really, it's like the AI, when you were talking about AI, now they're AI experts because it's the trend. So when you look at yourself and then you look at true entrepreneurs and you look at the people that really focus and make humanity difference, it's truly about that step forward in the right direction. And you've taken that. And it's interesting to see that too, as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really love that. And it's interesting because I started my business not because there was, a personal branding trend or anything of the sorts. I built my own visibility, created my own kind of, blueprint, saw all of the benefits that it brought to me and not just to me personally but clearly to the business, and then said, oh, I can package this and create this for other people as well. And it's interesting, they say, right, a lot of the businesses that we started out of the need of that we had, or something that we figured out for ourselves. And that was my journey as well. And now 4 years since incorporating brand of a leader, I now just hired my agency a month or 2 months ago to now represent me as a client to see what now is. It's really interesting, right? First, the business was born from what I had learned. Now the business has matured, and now the business is going to support me in my growth because I continue doing my own stuff on my own. And now the business is, my team is booking me on podcasts and, helping with content. And it's a fascinating exercise. But yeah, with direct connection to, I did it for myself, I uncovered a need, and then built the business around that for others.
So what's your next year going to look like? 2025.
There's a lot of growth for us. We've grown quite actively since we incorporated. The biggest piece that we're adding to the puzzle this year is PR. There is a big difference between personal branding and creating visibility and PR, but most people don't quite understand it. And the two industries, the two fields get conflated quite a bit. Just wrote an article in Entrepreneur Magazine on the difference between the two. But that PR piece, first you need the personal branding foundation. Then you can leverage PR to it, and we want to find a way of incorporating it. So right now we help clients with, writing content with, as I mentioned, LinkedIn and podcasting, writing articles, but not distribution of those articles. And that's the next step of what we want to add. And then the question becomes, do we grow that part of the business through an M&A? Do we create some kind of a joint venture, or do we just continue building and developing our own expertise? That's something that we'll figure out, and then we'll work on incorporating that. But a lot of exciting things. We're also sponsoring an EO event for the first time. I'd never done that, been member for 11 years, never kind of thought of that as an option. But the next regional conference, One Canada, is in Montreal. I'm in Montreal. So we're sponsoring, we're creating a really cool, fun experience. Are you coming, by the way? Are you attending?
I'm thinking about. I think I'm going to, because of the F1's there this
Yes.
at the same time, is it not?
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
yes. Oh, I definitely will be attending. Definitely, for sure.
Okay,
And
amazing.
we,
So
as an
make
EO
sure to
members,
buy
we
your
have to
ticket.
tell.
Hmm?
What's that? Sorry,
I
buy
said,
the ticket.
yeah, you have to register.
Oh no, I'll have to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay,
know
so
you're the
now
OG,
here.
but you still have to register.
Well, that's OG. We got a lot of perks here, because when we start talking about it, and my forum has been together for 25 years as well, right? So we've been
Wow.
together, like it's amazing in what we've gone
Wow.
through, and we go, man, I can't believe I've been in EO this long and seen how many people have gone through it. And I look at it, it actually changed my whole life to where I'm at and where I'm going, and meeting great people like yourself all over the world. This is
Right.
It's one of those things that you know that you don't know. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's basically where we're coming in to say, how do we find you? How does anybody get to know how to get a hold of you besides your name? And what's your website
My
for
name
the
does help. As I
brand?
said, if you punch it
Yeah.
into LinkedIn, the only Marina Byezhanova there, that would be me. And our website is very straightforward, brandofaleader.com.
And that's pretty simple, and all that in a bag of chips. You know what? Thank you very much for being on Shed Talk, being on my podcast, being on Shed Talk. And you know what? Like, share, snap, hit that button, do everything that you possibly can. And you know what? Reach out and be the greatest human being you possibly can be, and give back to humanity. Thanks again, Marina B. Oh, see, I got it right, right?
Yes, I like it. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now you know. Shed Talk.